Hello everyone! This is episode 9 of Dark Aspects and part 2 of my analysis for the original Paper Mario series. Today I'll be discussing the more adult content of Thousand Year Door, a game that, like I mentioned in the first video, hosts a literal gallows in the center of the hub world. Welcome to Rogueport, a run-down, crime-centered city where it really isn't out of place to think it was used for lynching at one point in time. To start off, and speaking of crime-ridden, let's discuss violence and drug implications as early as the beginning of the game. Rogueport is a town that sees Piantas from Super Mario Sunshine return, though unlike the paradise that was Isle Delfino, the few that find homes here are part of a yakuza, mobster or mafia outside of Japan, crime ring known as the Pianta Syndicate. They are located at the west part of the city, while the lowly rivaling organization Robo Gang, composed of a species called Craw, are based at the east side. The Pianta Syndicate is comparable to the real-world Sicilian Mafia, also known as the Italian Mob or simply the Mafia, evidenced by the Italian names, the title Don Pianta, their gambling nature, and the fact that all members are considered family, with the grandfather taking lead. This leader also goes by the name Dawn of Untimely Death. The names for Don Pianta in other languages too are based around the combination of infamous Al Capone with the Godfather films
Don Corleone, give me justice.
Their outfits are also clearly mobster with a black suit fedora sunglasses combo, albeit made hilarious with the signature Pianta hula skirt. Silliness in appearance aside, these gang wars are violent, as shown early on during Goombella's introduction, and the fact that there are staked skulls on both territories of Rogueport. This act of human head spiking is seen in media often as warnings for trespassers, an authority symbol, or trophies of war, and stems in inspiration from real-world examples throughout human history. Speaking of historical practice, the European version of the game removed one of two interaction animations for Mario, that being his raising an arm up in the air. This was obviously not the intention, but it bared enough resemblance to the Nazi salute to be taken out by the localization team, and that is at least worth mentioning. To wrap up violence implications, there is a heavily implied murder scene left in the Japanese release. While just a messy shed internationally, this uncensored version features a chalk outline of what looks like a toad, complete with a pool of blood. I also mentioned in the last video a side quest involving the transfer of a quite probably pornographic tape. The theme of Mario not knowing what content he's delivering finds its way here again, though this time a package finds its way to the back alley of Rogueport. It's most likely drugs. Finally, moving away from the hub area of the game though, the first instance of another dark aspect is in the very first chapter, the dragon boss that's been terrorizing the neighboring town. In the original Paper Mario, there were two boss encounters involving eating another smaller, sentient being. Tubba Blubba swallows down ghosts, and Huff and Puff eats his own followers to regain health. Similarly, but more horrifying, Hooktail in this game eats the crowd. The audience that watches Mario fight and participates by throwing items or cheering. Yeah, and unlike the first game, in Tubba's case where the boos were shown to be spit out alive and well after his defeat, Hooktail doesn't show any indication of her prey being okay at the end of the battle. The only living creature she coughs up is Coop's dad after all. With this knowledge, we can assume Coop's dad was swallowed whole, but the toads, they were completely mowed on. You could argue that Tubba Blubba makes a similar animation that looks as if he's chewing, but since the boos were okay, perhaps he was just savoring the flavor with his lips. That's his default animation after all. Anyway, no one here was spit back up, so my presumption has to be that they're dead. Regardless, consuming a live crowd to replenish health is terrifying. Later on in the game, Cortez the Pirate King utilizes a similar move in his battle, though instead of eating crowd members, he absorbs their souls. How horrific. I don't know about you, but all this talk of death is putting me in a mood. To kick off sexual references, let's not stray far away from Hooktail, as she very oddly takes a chance at bribing Mario into indulging in a fetish. You heard that right, the dragon seriously offers a foot-smelling session, and insists that people pay good money for this. Yes, it's as shocking as it sounds, and the player will fittingly get the option to say, "That's disgusting." Thankfully, even if you accept, she'll simply attack by biting Mario. If only it was a foot stomp like you sick people wanted. Moving on to a more normal sensuality, Princess Peach in this game is actually naked on 2 separate occasions, with option for more if the player desires. One of these situations is required by the story, and occurs when the princess needs to become invisible in order to successfully sneak around the base she's being held captive. The potion the player concocts has to be consumed in order to work, so one probably can't just rub it on themselves, which means only her body and not clothes are unseeable. To avoid being caught as a phantom dress, she disrobes and waltz around the fortress completely nude. We can't see her, of course, but the fact that she's undressed is somewhat of a perverse move from the developers. It's comical, and maybe that's why it was chosen, sure, but it seems like the combination of this and the fact that the player can make her take a shower at every chapter interval was for the other reason. Add in the X-Naught supercomputer, TEC, and it's falling in love with her being a subplot, and we're left to speculate whether or not it can spy on her via the cameras throughout the building. Back in Rogueport, during one of Frankly's long-winded speeches, he begins with the common phrase, "assuming we'll just make," but stops himself and simply assures Mario that he knows the saying already. "Assuming we'll just make an ass out of you and me" is what's being referenced, to which Flurry comments, "Oh yes, how inappropriate." Speaking of Madame Flurry, I've commented on her before in another video, but wow. Her design, being a wind spirit, reveals a voluptuous body with nothing but a necklace covering her bosom. Mario needs to grab hold of her in order for her to blow. Yep, you've got the idea. To quote Nintendo Power magazine, "We're not touching that one with a 10-foot pole." It's also mentioned that Flurry squashes enemies with her stage presence. Her lip lock attack is even called Sexy Kiss in the Japanese version. Another case of innuendo involving Goombella is in Chapter 2 during the hero's entrapment in the cage. If you happen to tattle on Puniper and only hear, Goombella will say, "That's Puniper of the Punies. He's a little bigger than the others, obviously, so maybe he can help us reach that special spot. Hee hee, just kidding." Speaking of, if Goombella's the active party member during the Miss Mouse cutscenes in which she flirts with Mario, the Goomba will occasionally call her a floozy. This also works if tattling the area, as she'll say Miss Mouse was here before, but I think she took the next train to Floozyville. Floozy, while once a more offensive term, is used to describe a woman as being overly promiscuous. To top off Goombella's suggestive dialogue, when tattling on a fuzzy, she comments as a closing thought, "These things really suck, ... HP. 2 more unrelated bits of dialogue sneaking in dirty terms are 1. A babam referring to businessmen as brown-nosers, guess where that slang comes from, and 2. Kammy Koopa saying why, even at my age, I was shaking what my mama gave me, when describing Glitzville to Bowser. Additionally, in the Japanese version of the game, Pika the Boo is wearing bunny ears rather than cat ears. It was likely censored or removed to dispel any resemblance to the copyrighted Playboy bunny outfit. Speaking of degrading women, one of the black chest demons that give Mario helpful curses throughout the quest also asks if he had expected a lovely lady to pop out instead. Finally, or not finally, if you really like this, to end sexual themes, there's this scene, which involves the shocked wife of the Twilight Town shopkeeper. Her husband is turned into a pig, though upon returning after that curse has been broken, you'll find not her husband, but another man. Not only that, but he's the handsome, flirty Frenchman Dupree that appears frequently throughout the game. Her real husband thinks there was some unfaithfulness going on when he walks in, and the two fight, while the wife comments on how she should trade him in since Dupree is younger and cuter. That's it for sex, but we're not done in general, so let's now continue on about the game overall. Starting off small, we have a pretty surprising revelation from one of Luigi's own tales. You can hear about it through the man himself, or the Super Luigi series of books, available for purchase after completion of Chapter 8. Upon arriving in the fabled Plump Belly village, Luigi's greeted with a two-headed serpent forcing the town's maidens to be sacrificed. That's right, mention of human sacrifice in a Mario game. The mayor's daughter is next in line to be offered up, but Luigi halts the ceremony by donning a bridal gown to take her place, getting closer to, and ultimately defeating the beast known as Hizza. This isn't the only trick Luigi pulls to best the creature, as he's able to win the fight by making Hizza eat itself. Another rather dark tidbit from Luigi's adventure comes from Volume 4, documenting his trek through the Rapturous Ruins. It's nothing particularly special, but the described emptiness of this place lost in time, and his meeting the only surviving member of an ancient land is quite eerie. Not to mention, that survivor is just a boy, one that completely fades from existence after their conversation. Moving on and backtracking a bit to Chapter 3, we have my favorite section of the game, of Glitz Glory. In quite the change up to the game's standard chapter formula, the third crystal star that Mario has to collect is a prize this time, attached to the champion's belt for the #1 fighter in an arena-style wrestling pit. Or so we thought. As Mario joins the ring and ascends its ranks, the plot starts to make clear how corrupt the organization is as mysteries begin unfolding. Prince Mush was the original champion of the pit before vanishing without a trace, with Rockhawk currently, before Mario intervenes, taking his place. Many fans of the Glitz Pit loved Prince Mush and wonder why he's disappeared so suddenly. It's only until later that we learn it wasn't by choice, as Grubba, founder and promoter of the pit, actually sapped the fighter's powers with energy from the real crystal star, entrapping him in a machine beneath the arena stage. Grubba did this because Mush found out about his power-enhancing secret. Meanwhile, Jolene, Grubba's secretary, is the sister of Mush and started working at the pit to try and uncover what really happened to her sibling. It's also learned that Jolene was the one privately messaging Mario about the dangers of the arena, using the name X and leaving clues that reveal the truth about Grubba. Being directed by this unknown person to gradually unearth these secrets is a little frightening, and honestly, by association, after hearing the email notification, which is the Super Mario Bros. 3 Ice World theme by the way, is genuinely spooky and it can catch you off guard. Pair this with the randomly capitalized text based on ransom notes, and you've got some fairly diseasing plot progression. The implications of what else Grubba does is intimidating too, because we see firsthand, for example, a couple of collapsed fighters that did a little too much investigating. Overall, nothing major, but the chapter can certainly provide a bit of a chilling experience. After the gold star is claimed and Jolene takes over Grubba's position, we're led to the depressing Twilight Town, and even though it's more in line with cliché horror in the case of Creepy Steeple, the introductory town is really in a dire state. Everywhere from the color tone consisting of deep red, brown, and purple hues, to the inhabitants, Twilighters, themselves being animated dolls with shadows covering half their faces. Combined with genuinely unnerving background music, the atmosphere is much more grim than most of Mario's takes on the genre. In addition to this, the plot for Chapter 4, For Pigs the Bell Tolls, oh, another Hemingway reference, is quite disturbing as it involves the residents unwillingly being transformed into pigs every time the steeple's bell rings. While this is scary in concept, the script even considers the more practical side of how it'd be scary. That is to say, how the townspeople's lives are being directly affected. For example, one mother of 3 children mentions her husband turning into a pig, and because of this the family has no source of income and is hungry. If the player is kind enough to give them food, the mom will transform too, right in front of all her kids. Obviously this is traumatic, but one kid surprisingly asks if pigs are good eaten. You can give them a hot dog, so that's dark for entirely different reasons. Anyway, when even the gatekeeper is turned into a little oink, Mario makes his way past to the top of the church and directly to the boss's lair, where it's learned a Duplighost is responsible for the chapter's events. After a supposed victory against the Mimic, the player takes control of a shadowed Mario instead of Peach for the usual post-chapter intermission. Now this species of enemy has always had the ability to shapeshift into whoever it wants, but this particular Duplighost has a special power to completely steal identities. The boss takes our hero's name and body for his own, and will only give them back to Mario if his real name is spoken, Dupless. it's quite disturbing to imagine something possessing and using your own body. But in this case, it's kind of terrifying watching Mario be inhabited, since the normally happy-go-lucky figure is now menacingly hunched over, sporting empty, unblinking, hollowed black eyes. You won't see Mario like this in any other game. After Mario takes back his identity and reunites with his confused allies, the game continues on and requires the crew to head towards a cursed island. In order to cross the ocean and make it there, though, the player will need help from the only known sailor living in Rogueport, Admiral Bobbery, a retired ship captain. And it's not easy getting him to agree, as it's learned the reason for his retirement was because his wife Scarlet had become severely ill when he was away, and was dead upon his return. In quite possibly the saddest exchange we've seen in a Mario game, an emotionally tormented Bobbery must read his deceased wife's letters to convince him to sail out for the first time since the incident. It's a powerful display of storytelling, and honestly an example of how inclusion of darker aspects in family-oriented media can be a good thing. In my opinion, when executed correctly, children should be exposed to this heavy development, as like real life, hardship and trauma will come unexpectedly, and hit even harder if they aren't told through respectable, careful means. Moving away from the more weighty subjects though, let's discuss something a bit sillier. In the next chapter, while traveling to Poshley Heights on board the XS Express, the player must interact with the ghost of a toad, humorously and fittingly named Ghost T. This has reason for dark aspects because he is a canonically deceased toad that passed away on the train, entrusting Mario with a diary that, if opened, will cause the ghost to suddenly appear on screen and inflict a game over. As we make our way to the end of the game, finally we have the titular 1000-Year Door, as, according to in-game legend, was created for the purpose of imprisoning a horrifying demon. This is the revealed reason antagonist Grotus wants to collect the crystal stars before Mario, to gain access and conquer the beast for himself. The demon was reportedly so catastrophic that it actually destroyed the old Rogueport that the current one sits on top of, and took the lives of 4 heroes, a Toad, a Goomba, Koopa, and Boo that stood against the threat 1 millennium ago. And they're actually the 4 that were transformed into the aforementioned Black Chess Spirits. Through Grotus' meddling, this now unsealed demon the heroes once fought against is named the Shadow Queen. She's still alive, and is now pitted against Mario for the game's final battle. Stakes here are higher than ever before, having one shot at the other main antagonist, and considering her previous act of malice 1000 years ago. Beyond this context, she's quite intimidating in battle by first using Peach as a vessel, again possession, to fight no holds barred. Her attacks are some of the strongest in-game, with the most powerful utilizing dead hands that rise from the ground and pull Mario under. These same hands can also be used to pull audience members under to heal herself like Hooktail and Cortez, while her standard hands have ability to drain life force. The Shadow Queen is also stated by Grifty to be responsible for the Pit of 100 Trials, a monster-infested dungeon created to torture those she disliked. All who fell into disfavor were thrown into rot. And with that, that's all I had for today, but before I go I want to mention one last thing. It's not dark by any means, but it can be pretty scary for any unexpected player. A character known as Lucky runs the Happy Lucky Lottery. The player can buy a ticket in hopes of scoring a prize the next day, as the winning number is randomly generated at midnight by the GameCube's internal clock. Lucky is usually a super friendly Bob-omb with a positive attitude, but if the player messes with the clock for any reason, say in order to buy multiple tickets, the game's data will note this, and Lucky will have a meltdown if the player admits they're responsible, to the point of making them think he's going to explode and pretending to shut off the game. This reminds me of Mr. Rossetti's explosive rants from the Animal Crossing series, as that game is entirely based around the GameCube's clock, and if one resets without saving, they're sure to get a mouthful. Mr. Rossetti even pulls the same reset trick, but made worse as he threatens to delete progress. But that concludes dark aspects of 1000-Year Door. That was quite a lot to cover, but would you guess that the next game in the series could have even more to talk about? Hopefully I'll see you next time for Super Paper Mario, the most text-dense Mario game in existence, and one with some pretty twisted plot points. See you for the finale.